Hello and welcome to Conducting Sexual Harassment Investigations. My name is Judy Saunders, and I'm a member of Greising Law's Employment Practice Group. I have several years, over 2 decades of litigation experience representing adults and children who have been the survivors of physical, psychological, and sexual abuse. I speak, write, and teach frequently about this topic and have released and co-authored the book, A War on My Body, A War on My Rights, which I was very honored to do with fellow women rights activists. In my capacity currently as a member of Greising Law, I defend public and private companies in lawsuits where there are allegations of discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. I'm part of the team that represents these entities also in conducting internal investigations. Today, here are the topics that we'll discover and our agenda. We're going to briefly look at the history of sexual harassment in the workplace. We're going to discuss interviewing complaining witnesses in sexual harassment investigations, how to address acts of retaliation, minimizing the impact that these allegations have on an organization's reputation, productivity, and culture, interviewing target witnesses and also protecting their rights. And finally, the last topic that we'll discuss is emotional IQ, which is a necessary skill corporate counsels should use when conducting internal investigations dealing with sexual harassment. Turning now to our first topic, the history of workplace sexual harassment in America. Well, the history of workplace sexual harassment and misconduct began well outside the corporate walls. The war against sexual violence was fueled and started by African American women who demanded an end to state sanctioned sexual violence. Going back as early before, but some of the early documentation is after the 1866 Memphis riots, where a white mob raped many African American women. These women summoned the courage to testify before the United States Congress. And in their testimony, these women sought to overturn laws that permitted not only policy and mindset, but sought to outlaw the legalized rape and sexual violence against enslaved Black women. So that happened very early on. Those were some of the first attacks against the normalizing of harassment, misconduct, and violence. Later in the 1960s and 50s, African American women, through the civil rights movement, sought to end the institutionalized and systemic control over the bodies and the lives of women. This pushback and the speaking out against sexual harassment and sexual violence continued with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That was an act to enforce the constitutional right to vote and also gave and conferred the jurisdiction to the district courts of the United States of America, to provide injunctive release against discrimination in public places. So the Civil Rights Act of 1964 provided a good foundation, really the first foundation against what so many women activists sought to build, and that was a new way and new laws that employees can use to fight against sexual harassment and violence, not only outside of business, but also within organizations and corporations. This Civil Rights Act, it was a landmark civil rights and labor law piece of legislation in the U.S. And as I was saying, it outlawed discrimination that was based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. It prohibited the unequal application of voting registration requirements, racial segregation in schools, public accommodations, and in the employment, in the workplace.